Hello, everyone, and welcome back. As always, I'm your girl, Candy Washington. Before we dive into today's episode, which is Andy Cohen is in his feelings, he is finally being called out for what we have been talking about for a few years now about his reunion hosting skills or perhaps lack thereof. No shade, but he doesn't seem very prepared. And then also his claims of being biased. Yes, we're going to get into it. But before we dive in, go ahead and like, subscribe, and share. So this is according to Reality Blurb. It says Andy Cohen is one of the few executive producers in reality TV who also has a presence on air. As fans know, he has hosted Watch What Happens Live for several years. In addition, he hosts all of the reunion specials for the network. This includes the housewife shows Below Deck and anything else that does a reunion at the end of the season. However, people have been calling out Andy for years now about ways he could be better as a host. In fact, some have said that he should step down in some cases. The most recent thing is that he responded to on his radio show to a recent article critiquing the way he hosts the reunion specials. It can be argued that Andy has heard criticism and has improved the way he goes about the reunions. This is because many of the more recent times he's hosted have been better. He asked follow-up questions, he has held people's feet to the fire, and we can't deny the fact that he brings a certain level of camp and humor to the reunions. Listen, it was tough to get through that little paragraph because, again, I don't know who Reality Blurb has in their pocket or who's in their pockets, because they seem to be really making a case for Andy Cohen doing better, and he has follow-up questions and he holds people to the fire. And it's like, well, duh, like that's what he should be doing. He should have follow-up questions that we actually want the answers to. He should hold people's feet to the fire because that's what a good host and a good executive does. And when I say a certain level of camp and humor, I don't really think Andy brings that much camp and humor to the reunions. He kind of just goes, right, guys? Like, I mean, and like that weird thing that he does with his, and he like scrunches up his face. But like, I don't think that's that funny. I don't think it's that humorous. Like, I just kind of think that this is another case of people who are Bravo-holics, where they just drink the Bravo Kool-Aid, they kiss the Andy ring no matter what. I'm more on the side of, what the critics are saying. I do think that Andy has been biased. I do think that Andy isn't prepared for the show. And I don't just blame Andy for that. I also blame like his assistants and the people who are prepping him and the production assistants and the people on his team, because they should be better prepared, because they're the ones who are actually writing the questions that Andy is asking. Like, he's not writing these questions. His team is writing the questions, and they are the ones who are falling flat, but they're not the ones whose face is on the line. So it goes down to Andy. So let's keep going. However, Reality T recently posted a feature article that provided a few tips to the Watch What Happens Live host. They included things like how he needs to hide his biases, embrace important conversations, and ask follow-up questions. I agree 100%. Side note, speaking of biases, lately there's been people who've been commenting, "Oh, Candy, you're so biased." I guess when it comes to like Kyle on Beverly Hills and Monica on Salt Lake City. To be very, very clear, I know my Candy Canes understands the difference, but just for the people who don't, as a content creator, I can't be biased. The only thing I can be is opinionated. And there's a difference between people not agreeing with my opinion and me being biased. I'm not biased. I have an opinion. People can be biased when they are in a position of power. For example, like in Andy Cohen, as an executive producer, as a host of the show, he should be neutral. As a human being, of course, he's going to have his opinion on who he likes more and different. But in the position of executive producer or host, he should be neutral and he shouldn't be biased. But you can only be biased when you have a position of power, right? When in a position where you should be neutral. If I was a journalist, if this was CNN or Fox or I don't know, whatever the case would be, if I had some type of journalistic integrity thing that I had to stand up to, where I should be reporting news in a neutral, fact-based way, then yeah, if I'm adding my opinion into something that should only be fact-based, that's biased, yes. But just as a content creator, as a blogger or a YouTuber or a podcaster or a social media influencer, I inherently cannot be biased. It's just my opinion that I'm giving, right? On the flip side of that, you could be biased if, again, you are from coming from a position of power or influence. And by that, if say someone was paying me to bash Kyle, then that would be biased because then I'm being unduly influenced by an outside source. Or if someone was paying me to say really great things about Kyle, then that would be biased. But as a content creator having an opinion, that's not bias. That's just an opinion. But I agree with what reality TV is saying regarding Andy Cohen, where he has a very different position. He's not a content creator. He's a producer, executive producer, and he's a host. So they're right. They're right. Recently, Andy's radio co host John brought up the article and used it as a discussion point on their show. The great thing is that he seemed to accept most of the points made against him as a reunion host. However, he did have a few excuses. It seems many people call out Andy over his performance in the Below Deck Season 7 reunion. Some say his hosting made them believe he didn't watch the season. However, Andy says he watches every show he hosts. I think that's a lie. I think that's a lie. I don't think Andy watches every show that he hosts. I think he watches excerpts and I think he gets cliff notes. But it's obvious if you watch Andy on not just reunion, but if you actually watch him on Watch What Happens Live, you can tell that he's learning things in the moment and he'll be like, oh yeah, that's a really good question. Or yeah, what about that? Oh wait, that did happen. Oh wait. And you can tell that he is learning things in the moment. And there's also people in his ear. He calls it the control room, like telling him things to say and giving him different tidbits. But he doesn't watch all of the shows. Like it's very, very clear. And what also is clear, and again, I blame more of his team for this than actually him, is you can tell that they're not actually listening to social media, like the collective consciousness, the collective voice of social media, of the greater voice of Bravo people. You can tell that they really are only listening to the Bravo-holics, the people who are just, yes, thank you, more please, with Bravo. The people who aren't really digging deeper, the people who aren't having different opinions or unpopular opinions, people who aren't calling people to task, whether it's Andy Cohen, whether it's the housewives, whether it's the below deck people, whoever it is. They're just listening to the yes people. They're not actually listening to the greater conversation that's going on. And that's very evident on Watch What Happens Live, and it's very evident at the reunions. They're drinking their own Kool-Aid and they're talking to themselves. And that's why he is so unprepared and so tone deaf in these moments, in the reunion moments and the Watch What Happens Live moments, because he's just not getting it. And that's not just an Andy Cohen fault. That's his team's fault. You know, if I was his assistant or coordinator or whatever the term is for the people who are responsible for prepping it, I would prep him very differently. My questions would be very different, right? There would be questions that we actual John Q public want to know, not these sort of softball biased Bravo Kool-Aid drinking questions. They'd be the real questions, right? Okay. He had this to say about the Below Deck Season 7 reunion. It sounds like an excuse, but it's the truth. I got a terrible dog bite right before the reunion and my head was not in it. His co-host attested to the dog bite. Well, if your head isn't in it, then you either have to recuse yourself and get someone to get in to, take your spot, or you postpone it till your head is in it. But like literally the dog ate my homework is your excuse. The dog bit me, so I couldn't pay attention while I did the reunion. One of the next pieces of criticism had to do with the reunion of the Real Housewives of Potomac Season 5. In that reunion, fans felt that he was overly hard on Monique Samuels, but gave Candace Dillard-Bassard a bit of a pass. This was cited as an example of him not hiding his biases. Andy, however, denied any claims of biases and stated sometimes fans can mistake him asking Bravo stars hard questions that need to be asked as being biased. I mean, to be honest with you, with Andy on this one, I cut it both ways. I think that he is clearly biased with some of the housewives. He has his favorites, and that is so evident and so true, and he is tone deaf sometimes with the other housewives, that he doesn't know are fan favorites or they're not fan favorites to him, and he can be biased in that way. But to be fair, because this is something I've also experienced that I talked about earlier in this video, is if you do ask a hard question, or if you do have an opinion that might not be popular, or if you do have an opinion that someone doesn't like, they are quick to call you bias. Am I biased, or do I just have an opinion that is different from yours? Am I biased, or am I just asking a hard question to somebody that's your favorite, that's your favorite? So for Andy on that one, I do understand where he's coming from, but I think that he has to ask the hard questions to everyone equally. And I think that's more of what they're saying. You can't go so hard on Monique, but then not go hard on Candace, when both of them had things that they needed to be accountable for. So that's more of what I think they're coming from with the bias. Yes, ask the hard questions, but you have to ask the hard questions to everyone, not just people that you don't find to be a favorite in your eyes, right? Besides this, the article called Andy out for his off-color comments and cited him once again, saying any holds a goal. However, Andy says he's never said that. He and his co-host agreed that people who have problems with off-color humor should probably not be watching Bravo. Now, this is the thing. Andy has said some very off-color, weird remarks that aren't exactly up to snuff or maybe PC. I'm not really going to do a deeper dive into that, because with that kind of stuff, it is what it is. And you have to take it and off comments. You kind of always have to take them within context. So there's that. But I want to know what you guys think. Like, do you agree with it with the articles that came out about Andy, not being prepared for reunions, being biased, not having his head in the game, not asking the right questions? I actually have to agree with the article's criticisms. I think that they were pretty spot on, and we have been saying that for years, over here with the Candy Cane Gang. We've been talking about that for years. I think that Andy is spread too thin. I think that there is no way he watches every single episode of all the shows he's doing reunions for. I think that his team has failed him. They don't have they're not on the pulse of what the true conversation is about Bravo and the shows and the people on there. They drink their own Kool-Aid and they are just talking to themselves. They're not actually engaging in a meaningful dialogue with the greater audience. And this is why Andy's team has failed him, and this is why Andy's not doing good at reunions or even on Watch What Happens Live, is simply because they don't know what they're talking about. And that is evident, and he's not prepared. Like, he can't be reading the reunion questions during the reunion taping. Like, at least read them in your, if you're not going to prepare for it, at least read them in your dressing room before you get on there. But if we can clearly see that you are reading these questions for the first time while you're taping it, that's just being unprofessional and not being prepared. And that's where the sloppiness comes in. That's where the not asking the right questions come in. That's where the biases come in. That's where it's falling flat. You're not prepared and you're not professional. Because as an executive producer and as a host, you have a duty to be neutral, and you have a duty to treat everyone equally, whether they are your favorite or not. If you want to be biased and say whatever you want, then come on over here, get a YouTube channel, get a podcast, start an Instagram or a TikTok, and then you can give your straight opinion however you want it, any type of way. But there's levels to this depending on, what your particular title is. And also what type of show you're watching, because, for example, if you're watching like Juicy Scoop with Heather McDonald, I would never say that she's biased, because it's her show and she's giving her point of view on the show, versus a Watch What Happens Live, which should be neutral. It shouldn't be Andy Cohen giving his opinion on these people. It should be more of, this is the broader conversation, if that makes sense. But let me know what you guys think. Put it down below. And do you think it's time for us to get a new host for the reunions? And maybe even a new host for Watch What Happens Live. I don't know. Maybe Andy could stick with Watch What Happens Live and leave hosting to somebody else. I don't know. Put it down below. But before you do that, go ahead and like, subscribe, and share. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye.